Okay.
Sorry, I like jumped to the middle. Okay. Can everybody see okay?
Yes,
All right, should I go ahead and start?
go ahead.
Okay, awesome. So we had the Children's Bereavement Center of South Texas, the CBCST. And so we're going to be going through, about the organization, finances and funding, issues, interview with one of their counselors, literature review, theoretical implications for social work practice, and then our concluding thoughts. So they were founded on May 20th, 1997 as a 501c3 nonprofit dedicated to serving children affected by the loss of a loved one. And that's reflected in their mission as well: foster healing for grieving children and youth, their families, and the community. And they serve thousands of children to young adults in South Texas, as well as their parents. The practice setting varies from center-based services to in-school supports. The main center is in San Antonio, but they've expanded. They have a center in Floresville, and they are offering supports in Uvalde temporarily as well. So here's some numbers on that. They've served about 6,000 individuals and families in counseling, about 6,500 peer support group visits, and 2,800 children and families. Okay, oh, I went too far. Okay, so now Santiago is going to share this next part.
Thank you, Sarah. Good evening, everybody. My name is Santiago Morales, and I'll be covering the services and interventions provided by the CBCST. So the first of all, they do an individual assessment and therapy, and it's clinical social workers and LPCs. They're conducting an intake and assessment with the child and family members. What they're doing, they're trying to establish a baseline so the counselors can decide if the clients are ready to grieve and partake in additional grief counseling. Now, if the child or adult, parent, sibling isn't, and they're experiencing some other abnormal behaviors, such as substance abuse or suicidal ideations, then the client's going to be referred out to another agency to get treatment, because you want the client in a state where they can be effective in receiving the grief counseling and grief therapy. And then you see grief camps. Those are kind of seasonal, offered 4 times a year. Crisis response services. Another one I'd like to highlight is the bottom one, the school-based support groups. And just as adults eventually go back to work and normalize over time, it's important for a child to eventually go back to school and feel the love and compassion as well. It's hard to learn and keep focused on school assignments and teachers in the classroom while we're still grieving and confused. So the community partners in the San Antonio area, they work together to foster a network of support for these children and try to get them to normalize in a school setting again. So there's numerous independent school districts have partnered with the Bereavement Center to make positive impact on the child, both emotionally and academically. So the children attending these support groups, they start establishing a sense of belonging again and receive that social support from peers. Just as adults, we kind of want that as well. And I think it's from a social work aspect, this is significant because, they are able to cater to clients of all socioeconomic backgrounds. It eliminates the need for parents to pay out of pocket, provide additional transportation, and take work off for their children to receive treatment. And we'll kind of highlight this in the next video, the next slide.
I'm not getting any sound.
Sarah, you're muted.
Well, the muting shouldn't affect it. Let me see if it will share the sound. Well, can you hear it with the unmuting?
I can hear music now.
We
Okay.
had found out that my husband, Mikey, had died by suicide. He had left the house and didn't come back. Twofold. I wanted to, as well. When I reached out to the center, it was twofold. I wanted to get help for
Can everyone see and hear now?
I can, yes.
girls, but I also wanted to check in with somebody who could tell me that what I was seeing was normal, was okay.
Hopefully we can provide the space for them to seek the help and facilitate the healing to allow them to understand that they're not the only ones. And being in a peer support group, they can understand and be around other families who have had a similar loss.
A mom is going to learn more from another mom in the group than they are from someone who maybe has a degree and is leading the group. An 8-year-old is going to learn better from another 8-year-old. So trust that if we bring people together and give the right environment, that they're going to reach out to each other and connect.
There's nobody else in our friend group or family who something like this. But the Children's Bereavement Center gave us a place where everybody there had been through something like this.
It made me feel a lot less like alone, because like I just like out of all the people that like of like my friends, like no one knows how it is, and no one knows exactly how bad it has been for us.
Most of the kids in the group had people who had died by suicide, so they knew all the feelings.
It's a safe place. They're not going to judge you for your feelings. They're not going to interrupt you, and they're not going to like kind of make your feelings small. They're going to let you handle your feelings, and they're going to help you through it, and they're not just going to silence those feelings, because I feel like that happens a lot at school.
The different activities that they do in group help them find different ways to recognize their feelings, express them, and cope. And how do you manage this emotion so it doesn't get out of control, it doesn't turn into something unhealthy.
Yeah.
Thank you. So as you can see, this is the finance and funding side. Well, one of the first questions I had when we started conducting this interview is like, you guys are doing an awesome thing here, but you guys don't charge your clients and for anything, and you have a full staff and therapy center. Like, how is that possible? So as you can see, 1% of the center's revenue comes from the program fees, which as a social worker, that's amazing to see. However, you want to make sure it's a sustainable model to keep helping these clients. And it is. As we conducted the interview, we found out that a huge corporations based out of San Antonio are big donors, companies such as USAA, HEB, and Valero. So it's great to see that community outreach having a positive impact on these children and their families. And as far as expenses go, as you can see that the program services, they make up a majority of their expenses. And also they have a 4-star ranking on the Charity Navigator. And I'll be followed by Sarah.
Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about some grief issues that the center goes into with its clients. So again, we talked about they serve children through young adults and their parents as well. The grief issues vary from parents lost to other family members, such as like grandparents and uncles, accidents, etc. So there's an initial intake process where the family is assessed and is decided whether they are ready for group therapy, individual therapy, or another service. Grief issues are targeted by providing group therapy that pairs individuals with similar loss types together. Parents are separated into their own groups, and then the children are separated by age as well. But all the groups follow the same subject and curriculum each week, just it's kind of catered to everybody's developmental level as appropriate, which, really brings the family together at the end of the night because they were all, in their individual groups that they can talk about what they learned, what they discussed, and be on the same topics. So we interviewed one of the counselors there, Michelle Gillette Vaughn. She's at LCSW. So she provides individual counseling and supervises group therapy facilitators, among other things. Another interesting fact is she's the only social worker there currently. Everybody else is LPCs or has their PhD. So she graduated from Arizona State in 2017 with her MSW and got her LCSW in 2020. She had experience in a lot of other settings before this, middle school, foster adoption agency, outreach at a nonprofit, and case management in a hospital. And she said really all those positions taught her about loss and in various ways. And she was really drawn to the CBCST because of the team environment and the services that were offered there for free. She said that was really unusual, compared to some of her other experiences in grief therapy, and that they also keep the groups small too. They don't let them get too large because they really want it to be an effective model for all the age groups and clients. So right now they offer internships for LPCs, and they're adding on MSWs this fall, which is exciting. And so what those interns do is there's the group therapy that they will facilitate volunteers, that some of the groups with different age kiddos. And yeah, but some of the other duties that the interns have is helping with intake and various aspects. So they work with all socioeconomic levels. There's no really cutoff point. They really want to bring everybody together. And the only client restrictions are, they'll refer out high need cases, such as, those with autism or schizophrenia. They aren't typically seen, as it could disrupt the group environment, especially. And she said 8 to 12 is kind of the average number of sessions that families need, but it can vary, depending on what the need level is. And they really determine the readiness for, group and counseling too, by having the family participate in their own mini group just among their own family members. Something else she shared, which was interesting, is that they don't diagnose at the center because they don't have to bill insurance since the services are free, which really has allowed them to focus more on the grief work and, things like depression or PTSD, those things that come up, they'll refer out those other issues so that they can really have everyone focused on the grief work there. So now I'll turn the time over to Jamie.
All right, thank you, Sarah. So for the literature review, I will utilize Academic Search Complete through UH Libraries. The type of population involved will be children, adolescents, teens, and then also the parent or guardian of the child. The type of loss typically involved would be sometimes a parent, a sibling, a friend, or extended family. And then you can go to the next slide. So there's many special needs and challenges to healthy grieving for children. Kurian described them as silent mourners because adults involved in the child's life do not believe there's a need for them to express their grief, or they assume they do not have the capacity to properly understand the complexities involved with death. Additionally, children and especially adolescents are experiencing various developmental changes that could coincide with their grief. So as they transition from childhood to adulthood. Younger children may also be experiencing that fear of obliteration as they begin to understand the permanence of death. Although death is a big fear, many younger people have more fear of being killed, not of dying from natural causes or old age. So this idea tends to form when a child experiences a loss. Lastly, children do not always have the life experience. Sorry, guys, it's this dog is making a lot of noise. Children do not always have the life experience or coping skills that have been developed by those who have experienced loss to fully kind of grapple with the emotions related to the grief. This has sometimes led the grieving children to partake in coping behaviors such as bullying. There might be a decline in school performance or withdrawing from friends and loved ones. And boys tend to externalize their grief reactions, whereas girls tend to internalize them. All right. And some contributing factors to complicated grief for a child are pretty similar to that of adults. If the death was sudden or traumatic, it could lead to complicated grief and problems with processing grief later in life. Crenshaw described this as childhood traumatic grief. If it is a stigmatized death, such as a suicide, a homicide, or it's involved with HIV or AIDS, the grieving child experience maybe multiple losses, such as both parents dying or multiple loved ones dying. If the relationship with the deceased was that could also contribute to that as well. So like if the relationship was abusive in some way. And then also another big contributing factor is the grief process of the surviving parent or caretaker. The both death family structure is actually one of the biggest predictors of a child's mental health. So as we're supporting the child, we're also supporting the surviving parent or caretaker as well. All right. I decided to also kind of focus on emotionally focused therapy as kind of a framework and intervention that Carrie said would be very helpful in grief for processing grief for children. It's traditionally used in marriage counseling and is based in attachment theory. The idea is that the clients move from a position of distress to a connected relationship. It helps clients communicate their thoughts, feelings, and emotions related to what is causing them their grief. I like this quote. It was helping clients communicate from their heart to help foster secure relationships. The focus is on the emotions that lead to their grief reactions rather than the behavior that's outwardly expressed. And similar to Well Felt, the counselor is the guide and not the expert. So implications of social work practice. You're working with both the child and the adult involved who might also be grieving. So you're educating child on coping mechanisms that they may not know, as well as the adult with coping mechanisms, and then also helping the adult learn how to support the child as well. You're also educating based on a child's level of understanding. Being patient with younger clients, especially if they do have trouble understanding and answering questions a lot. Also, of course, expressing empathy with your patients or your clients, being flexible with the client's needs. Like one intervention or framework might not work for that client. So being able to kind of pivot in a way that helps them best. I think also there needs to be a lot more further research within this population. Children, of course, are definitely, I think, ignored in a lot of the literature. And then I think also, especially children with IDD or high needs are also ignored. They're tended to be seen as like not being capable of understanding, or like people that are taking care of them will try to hide the grief just so they don't upset them. So I think further research is needed to kind of fully understand how best to support children with intellectual and developmental disabilities.
Thank you, Jamie. So theoretical framework, in addition to the emotionally focused therapy that Jamie went over, the CBSD also utilizes the dual process model. And this is needed because of the client's brain. It's still developing and doesn't have the rationale you or I would have, the adult might have. So a distinctive approach is needed in order to move the child out of the avoidance phase and get them back into that interacting with supportive community. Next slide. So in conclusion, we love this agency. We love the fact that the Children's Bereavement Center of South Texas is community-based, and they are in San Antonio. They recognize the diverse social economic backgrounds of their clientele and the obstacles and the resources available for families that may or may not be there. So the CBCST maintains the relationship needed for the community outreach from company headquarters based out of San Antonio. Like I stated earlier, you have United Way, USAA, Valero. The intervention methods that we went over earlier that the agency provides for the children do not focus on the individual itself, but their surroundings as well. So through siblings, peer support networks, camps, school-based support groups, the child can trust that their entire support system is on board with them and providing the help they need. Like I said, the agency is a nonprofit organization that is service-oriented, and going with their NASW values, they're dedicated to fostering healing for grieving children and their families. Not just a place to grieve, but a house of love for families to transform and discover the next chapter of their lives. And pending any questions, this concludes our presentation. Thank you.
Wow, thank you guys so much. That was great. Does anybody have any questions or comments? I think this population has so many needs, and unresolved grief of children, you know, can really affect negatively as they get older into adulthood or you know, older, you know, adolescence and all. That's where kids start getting into trouble. And so many times it's due to this, you know, not having resolved those multiple losses that kids can experience. So organizations like this, this organization actually has a larger scope than Bo's Place, which we learned about in this course, in that it looks like, you know, any kind of relationship loss, like a friend, the death of a friend, or you know, other family members. You know, they would still be eligible for services, where Bo's Place, you know, is more limited to immediate family loss. So it's beautiful work and really important. And I really appreciated how you guys undergirded the whole thing with social work values. So good job.
I wanted to say one thing. I really appreciate this. It's kind of ironic that I'm in this class. I've taken a different class like this in undergrad, or it's very similar class. And recently I have a very close friend who her fiance just suddenly died of like a heart attack, like recently in the last month. And then she was 7 months pregnant and she lost her child. And they just had the burial on Saturday. And so it's like me, like I'm trying to text her because she's having a bad day while I'm trying to also focus on everything that's going on here, because she's dealing with so much grief and I don't know really how to help her. But it feels like, you know, I text her, I was like, well, I'm in a class ironically right now dealing with grief and loss, and maybe I might be able to give you some, what did I say? I said something like some guidance on different organizations in the community. So when you guys started talking about that, I just thought, you know, her children, they've lost someone who there was like a father figure. And then it's a whole nother thing that happened that I won't even get into, but I'm just grateful that I tuned in tonight to this so that I can take this information. Hopefully, I mean, I don't know that it'll help her. I don't know that, you know, it'll be beneficial in any way, but I can pass it along, you know?
Yeah,
that's how I
can
felt.
share the link. We can definitely share the link of the website and the resources.
So it's helpful to me just so I
Yes,
can
that would
pass
be
it
great.
along, you know? But great job.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. That's great to hear.